Everybody say hi to Sister Ashley.
Hi. Hey, how you doing, Sister Ashley? Does everyone have this book?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Very good. And we're off to a good start today. Brother Anthony, if you want to move up here, you can. Brother Kevin, I was informed by Brother Joe, is just going to press quit.
Quit.
Yes, sir.
We got started. What this for? Is us?
No, sir.
Take to the drawing board.
Move on up here to the podium.
Back there.
Yeah,
nowhere.
we're going to the back row and back row. Don't blame you.
Huh?
Don't blame you for what. Back row.
Back to page 7, I'm supposed to be.
Move on up here to the podium.
Yeah, you got your
Yeah.
accountability partner. over there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Plugged in there. Brother Christian, I'm going to move this just a little bit closer just to make sure she can hear you.
Now, one thing I have included in my syllabus is midterm and a final, even though they have not, I don't think there's like officially dates set for midterms or finals. Finals is obviously going to be the very last day of the school year, and then also the classes before Christmas break. But the midterms are the ones that might change. So like on the syllabus I gave y'all for ministerial practicalities yesterday, and then this one I do have midterm put down, but could change. We'll see about that though. Now, one thing I do want to talk about briefly, I did mention it yesterday in ministerial practicalities, but I just wanted to address it again. So what I wrote on the board, I wrote it up there, and I never talked about it. But so each week when we go over our lesson in ministerial practicalities, whatever we cover, I'd like you to do a summary. You can write it out. You can type it out if you'd like. But it needs to be a page and a half. So notebook paper, copy paper, okay, page front and a half, okay. You'll have more than enough material to now summarize, all right, of what we studied in class that week. So put it in your words, okay. It's easy to just write straight from the textbook onto your paper, but summarize it, kind of put it in your own words. The only way it's going to be wrong is if it is something we obviously did not study that week, okay? So, and then include commentary. So something that we covered, maybe that you found interesting, highlights, what you highlight in your book, or if you really, find it profound or something like that, star it and, write your thoughts on that part of the lesson from the textbook, and do a commentary on it, like what your thoughts are, how it benefits you, how you think it could help you in your service for the Lord, or even just in your life. And then every other week or so, I did mention this, we'll have like an open book quiz. So I'm gonna do 10 questions probably at the most. If I do more than that, it'll be because we covered a bunch of stuff in the class weeks before. And it'll be 10 or so questions, open book. So you can use your textbook. And, if I write down a question that none of y'all can find the answer to in the textbook, then, I'll open it because I do make mistakes. But with the questions I make for those quizzes will definitely be drawing straight from the textbook. I'm going to do my best to stick to it. Now, that's for ministerial practicalities. For manners and customs, I haven't really decided if there's going to be like a every week type of homework. I mean, the only thing I could think of would have been like the summary each week over the lesson. But for the manners and customs class, I do have tests and stuff already wrote up for the chapters because I've taught this class before, unfortunately. So that we will have tests, but we also get study guides, which are pretty much the test. And then I take the study guide or what was in the study guide and transition those notes in the study guide into questions, multiple choice, fill in the blank, and short answer questions. So we might do a test kind of every other week. We'll see. I'm still, because I think the first year I taught this class, my first year teaching, I was a little, I think I may have went a little overboard. And because y'all don't tell her I said this, but I think I drove Sister Beverly crazy. Because tests every week, study guides, it was a lot. And, but she stuck it out. But bless her heart, I could tell it was, because I can't remember having an instructor that did anything like that. But with this material, in this book, it was easy to do so. And it's also real easy if you don't have anything like that, like a test or any type of weekly work, to just kind of let a lot of this information just get filed in there and never, gets used even over the course of the school year, and then it's gone, But we'll see. There won't be a test next week, so if we have a test, it'll be after the first couple chapters, and we'll go from there. But like I said, if I decide, like, let's say we cover the clothing chapter today, next week we look at the dwellings chapter, and I say, well, I think we could do a test on this. I will give you all the study guide to study over the week. And like what's in the study guide, most of it, all of it, I might reword it a little bit. It's taken directly from the textbook. So you'll be able to find all of that in the textbook as well. And a lot of what I put in the study guides, I've got marked in my book. So like if we go over, like I'll say, make sure and note that might be on a test. I'll definitely give y'all some clues when and some of it is my own underlining stuff because it's something I found interesting. But anyway, there are two parts to this book. Part 1, family life, and then part 2, institutions and customs. And there are some chapters in this book that are very long, like especially the religion chapter, which is the very last one. I think it's like 50 pages. But there's a lot of, one thing I like about this book is there's a lot of pictures, good pictures too. But so you'll come upon like there, full, just that little bit of info. So that's what some of the pages are, And then you have some that are full words. But there's pictures, I believe, on every page of this book. Good pictures, like I said. And I think that's one of the reasons I always like this class. The textbook was interesting. But so there might be some chapters that we really move through, and there might be some that, we kind of sludge through, have to fight through really long. We might have to carry them over to the next week. But on the back page of the syllabus, all those open blank weeks, that's going to be geography. I haven't really got a chance to pick out what exact maps I want us to stick to and what to cover and study over. But there's going to be, let me look something up real quick and I'll see if I pull it up on the TV. I can show y'all what you'll have to be memorizing, and I may add to it, may take away from it, what you'll have to memorize for the geography final, just so you have an idea, even though geography is still some time away. And as time goes on, I'll see about it. I may end up kind of adopting the summary as part of this class. That might end up being something that you have to do for this class as well. But if there ever comes a point where you are having might be having an issue keeping up with the load of your classwork, let me know, please, and we'll see. I'll see if I can dial it back a little bit, or maybe stretch, the tests out further, or make them shorter, or whatever. But because I definitely don't want anybody to be overburdened. I want you to be challenged, but I don't want it to be like a horror movie. I don't want it to be painful. So plug it up. Forgot about the recording. It might be something you can look around. What was this TV purchased yesterday?
Yeah,
Did
it was.
Brother Joe run to the store and buy one?
Yes.
When I saw the box out there, I was just imagining, something like that happening.
Exactly what happened.
Let's see. Was this working for them yesterday? It was.
I think it, is it on HDMI 2?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it is. Good.
I tried all three. Yeah, it's plugged into HDMI 2 and back to the TV. I'm trying to plug it.
There it goes.
Nope. Let's see. No, I'm not. Oh, wow. This was okay, I'm just gonna read them off. Okay, there'll be a number of cities that you have to memorize, their location. And what I did with, that first year class, what they did was I put a projector right here, like one of the old fashioned ones, and I put a clear, I think it was just a page protector, and I've taken a Sharpie and kind of traced out, a map. And then they had to go, and they had weeks to practice. They could, if they wanted to, they could use a projector and practice it. And so they had to go and they had to mark on each of these dots, which were already there, but they had to write the name of the city. So it's partly where they're located, but mainly the name. Okay, so there'll be a dot on the map, and you'll have to write the name of the city there. They're 18, and we looked at some of the places in the Bible where these cities are talked about, what's happening when they're mentioned. So it's not just memorizing cities on a map, but the significance of them. And some of them, they're minor. They may be mentioned just a couple times in the Bible. Some of them are pretty major. So I'll name them off. I might go ahead and print this off for y'all and give it to y'all next week. So you'll have the whole school year to look at it. All right, so Bethel, Caesarea, Gadara, Jericho, Nazareth, Shiloh, Bethlehem, Capernaum, Gath, Jerusalem, Rabbah, Tel Aviv, more so a modern city, Beersheba, Damascus, Gaza, Joppa, Samaria, and Tyre. And those are cities. And like I said, we'll do a study of what's going on. And this is preventing me from even using my goof around with it. Or break. See if I can't get it to work. All right. Now there were 6 cities of refuge, all right, in the Old Testament, and that's when they were established. There's Kadesh, Golan, Shechem, Ramoth Gilead, Hebron, and Bezir. And then that's all the cities. So those 18 just regular. I say regular city. That's kind of demeaning. But then you had the cities of refuge. Right? And then there are some bodies of water that you need to know. Right? The Mediterranean Sea. It's going to be this big blank area, all right, on the west side of your map. Then you've got the Jordan River, which kind of divides modern day Israel. And then you've got the Sea of Galilee, which is the northern part of the Jordan River. And then the Dead Sea, which is at the southern part, where the Jordan River kind of flows to. All right, then there's a number of mountains, 8 of them, that'll also be needed to memorize. And like with all the cities, we'll be studying them, the significant events that happened at these mountains. There's Mount Carmel, Mount Gerizim, Mount Morah, Mount Nebo, Mount Ebal, Mount Hermon, Mount Moriah, and the Mount of Olives. So a number of those parts sound really familiar. And then the last part of the test, I'm trying to remember exactly how I did it on the test, but you'll also have to memorize the 12 tribes of Israel and, match them to, I'm trying to remember, that might have been like a mix and match, or match the names to their, who they were, where their allotment was, and there may have been a map that accompanied that. But you read about the 12 sons of Jacob there in Genesis chapters 29 and 30, and that's where you get those 12 tribes. Not all of them received allotments of land, but all of them will be needed to be memorized. So those 12 sons are Reuben, and you have to also remember who their mother was, okay? So Reuben was the son of Leah, and then also Simeon. All of them, there were, I think, 4 women that were the mothers. So there was Leah, her sons with Jacob were Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, and then also Judah, that was his eldest sons, and then Bilhah, who was Rachel's handmaid. She had Dan and Naphtali, and then you had the sons of Zilpah, who was Leah's handmaid, Gad, Asher, and then Leah had another 2 sons, Issachar and Zebulun, and then you had the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. And he also had some daughters, I believe, in there as well. So you'll have to memorize them. But like I said, that's still a very long way away. And I'll print this out so y'all can have it to look over if you want to, but we won't really get into it until around a little before spring break. So now, one thing I wanted to point out on the syllabus, like I mentioned, all the blank weeks are going to be geography. February 20th is going to be an introduction to geography, and then also for a little bit afterwards, we're going to have time in the library. That was also something that was on the Ministerial Practicalities syllabus I forgot to address. If you see library on the syllabus, it means part of the class is going to be spent in the library for y'all to utilize it, and also to spend time working on your research paper, your presentation. Now, I do realize that I think all except one, and maybe a laptop, most of the computers are in here. So y'all can work in here on those days as well. But if you want to utilize the knowledge, the resources that are in the library, that'll be a good chance to do so as well. So part of this class, part of your grade, a big part of your grade, is going to be a research paper that you do this semester for the fall semester. And the topic, okay, y'all may have noticed a lot of artifacts and things around the school, like that model house over there that someone has put a bottled water on. It's not part of it, but that was Mama Donna's project. She chose to do a model house, and she did a research paper on it the first semester, okay? But what you're doing is you choose you could choose a replica, to do a replica of an artifact. So like a lot of what's in the library, like there's a model sword, there's baskets, someone did a model of a plow. I think there's even like a cat of 9 tails in their leather one. Downstairs, I believe they're still down there, there's a Goliath spear and sword. At least I hope it's still down there. There's a lot of work put into those. But that's like a replica. Now, the Goliath spear and sword, that was a 1-to-1 ratio size replica. You don't have to do anything that large. But you could choose to do any type of replica of an artifact or something that people would have used in their day-to-day lives. And Sister Donna actually got the inspiration for her project from the book, all right, from the Dwellings chapter, which is chapter 2. And so we covered that in the first semester as a research paper, okay? So you're going to research your chosen artifact, or if you're going to be doing like a model of a house or a building. But I know one year there had been a student, I believe, who was planning on doing like a bow and arrow. That was never done. But there's all kinds of things that could be done in here. But if you wanted to do something that had already been done, you need to come and talk to me about it. But if it's something that's not been done, not anything that's put up in the school, then you're free to do it. Now, I think another thing that's in this classroom where the elevator is like a robe someone had done. So there's bunch of things out there you could do. You know, whatever you choose, you know, run it by me, because I'd like to know what you're going to be researching. Maybe I can help you out or something like that with books and stuff you could use. But that research paper, let me look here for a second. I think I wrote down what I wanted on it. And then this is something you could start thinking about, you know, today, and start looking for stuff that could help you prepare to write research paper. Okay, there it is. So the first semester, fall semester, it's a 2-part deal. Okay, you're going to do a research paper on it, and then in the spring, at the end of the year, in May or whenever finals is, you'll be bringing in your artifact or your project that you built and completed, and you'll be given a presentation along with it. So if you do really good on your research paper presentation, you'll have all the information that's going to go in that already. You know, what you'll have to do then is like find pictures and stuff that could, you know, supplement your presentation. So 4 pages, not front and back, 2 pages front and back. So 4 pages. If you were to type it out, it'd be just 4 pages. 12-point font, Times New Roman. If you get anything from you know, do y'all know how to cite sources? Okay, I'll maybe when we do our library day, or I might do it next week, show you how you cite your sources, because I've got a binder that I used or was given that's for me to use when I write my thesis, because you have to cite your sources when you do that, because there's this thing called plagiarism, you know, stealing people's ideas, not a good thing, and plus, you know, it's definitely a dishonest thing. So yeah, 4 pages or 2 pages front and back, 12-point font, Times New Roman, and then next week I'll do a little lesson on, or just a little seminar or whatever on how to cite your sources. Okay, and then the presentation, and I'm going to print this out. This is like what I've written down in the last couple days. The presentation is 20 slides, which will not be a problem because you'll have that research paper that you can draw from. So that's not going to be a problem. At least 15 of them need to be information slides, and you know, you can make as big a presentation as you want. And then at least 5 slides that have really good pictures. I don't know about y'all, but I really like pictures to go along with the lessons and stuff like that. It really helps. And even if you find a video that you think goes really well with your, really helps your presentation, you can add them, but only one. And this is not a timed thing, so you don't have to go, you know, you have to get up there and present on your project for 20 minutes. It's nothing like that. It's just however long your presentation is. If you do use a video, it needs to be, say, no longer than 2-3 minutes. Like if you get a video and it's just a part of that video, you know, you can crop it or whatever the word is. But I don't think y'all are going to have a problem with that. Y'all did really good last year. So with your projects and stuff that I had y'all do. Y'all's little lessons that y'all did. So I'm not real worried about y'all having an issue with that. Let's see here. Okay, we got a little bit. Okay. Well, any questions so far or comments? Okay. I guess we will, I believe there's an introduction in the textbook. We'll look at that. Oh, and both classes that y'all have me for, the week before finals is gonna be review. Alright, so we'll definitely, I always have had a problem keeping, keeping the final from getting too long, so that's why I definitely want to give a full week, a full class for review. But like with this class especially, all the questions that are on the finals, you will already have, because it's going to be questions pulled from the tests that we have. So you'll have, I won't have to give y'all a study guide because you'll have those tests. All right. All right, so there's the preface or preface there at the beginning, and then the introduction. We'll go over those and have us a little break. All right, so everyone, ready to go? Page number 4. Even here with the introduction, they already start with the pictures. All right, preface. We live in an age of great change, and it is for this reason that books become dated. The knowledge explosion ensures that any book eventually has to be revised in order to keep its readers fully informed. There are also styles in writing and illustration that are characteristic of a particular time and place. These things have been true of Manners and Customs of Bible Lands, which was written by Fred White in 1953. Historians, archaeologists, social anthropologists, and theologians have worked hard on the scripture text and at sites in the Holy Land to provide more information for the person who wants a deeper understanding of the Bible setting. Much of their work is referred to in the bibliography of this book. But there's another reason books become dated. They sometimes so stimulate the reader's appetites that those persons want more. This updated and rewritten version of Manners and Customs of Bible Lands has attempted to provide additional information to meet such a need. In addition, travel to the Holy Land has shown many Christians that Bible background is a help in making scriptures come alive. After travelers return home, they want information of a more satisfying kind than they were able to glean from a short visit. Opportunity has been taken within this book to help people who still plan to visit the Holy Land. Not only do many Christians owe Fred White a debt for opening their eyes and for creating an appetite for more, but they also ought to give him credit as they read this new book. Before I wrote it, I read the older work several times until it became part of my own thinking. In the work of Christian ministry, truly, we enter into each other's labors. I pray that the work we have both done and the results of scholars' works made known during the past 30 years will so stimulate readers to thirst for more. One thing, a problem that I ran into after I finished this class was every time I saw a book in regards to Manners and Customs, it made its way onto my list that I wanted to get. Because there are so many books out there that go beyond even what this book covers. And there's a lot of information in this book. But what that line there, where it says, in addition, travel to the Holy Land has shown many Christians that Bible background is a help in making scriptures come alive. When you understand the customs of the day, why things were done a certain way, it really helps bring a light to a lot of what you read in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, and then also as you get into the New Testament, of course, as well. And then when you look at geography, you begin to understand, when it talks about when they went to Jerusalem, they went up to Jerusalem. You start to understand, the lay of the land. It wasn't, all flat. It was very hilly terrain over there, mountainous. It's very rocky. We got grass everywhere and stuff like that, but in that area, it's a lot of rock. When they when they went to stone somebody, they never had a problem finding stones, okay? Matter of fact, there are areas, I've never been to Israel, or I've never been out of the U.S., but if I were to ever go anywhere, it'd be, to Israel, to the Bible lands. But, there are areas, you see pictures a lot of times where there's just, in these fields, just kind of piles of rocks. A lot of that is where animals graze, so they've kind of, moved all the rocks, gathered all the rocks in one area. But it's kind of funny, because stoning was very much a part of punishment back in that time, and rocks were never hard to come by. But you begin to understand and see a lot of what you read in the Bible kind of like it comes into focus, and even it's like maybe the difference from watching black and white television to color television. It really, what you read kind of pops. All right, the introduction. Christians are faced with problems of meaning when they come to the Bible. God's word came in particular places at particular times to particular people. It is only as we stand in those people's shoes and understand what God was saying to them that the words can have full meaning for us. Part of standing in their shoes is to understand the language in which the revelation came. This has been made possible for most Christians through the work of Bible translations. The other aspect of standing in the shoes of biblical people involves gaining a feel for what the terminology refers to. We can get such a feel by placing ourselves back into the context of the Bible era's homes, countrysides, and marketplaces. In this book, I have sought to give the reader a feel for Bible times so that the whole Bible will come more alive. We are fortunate that the lifestyle of the people of the book has remained fairly stable for hundreds of years, and that even in the 20th century, people can visit the lands of the Bible and see things that were happening centuries ago. 21st century now. The lifestyle of the people has also been recorded in words and artifacts, in pictures, and even in the rubbish of the past. It is through the study of such sources that it is possible to recapture something of how things were in Bible times. The people of the Bible may have been conservative in attitude, but there was a richness and variation in their culture. Within the so-called Fertile Crescent between the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf, there was great variety. Life for the poor was not the same as life for the wealthy. Life in the hot valley of the River Jordan was different from life on the cool mountains surrounding Jerusalem. Life in summer was different from life in winter. Life for the nomadic herdsman differed from life for an urban tradesman. And in a land that was subject to continual warfare, life was different under the occupation of the Assyrians from life under the occupation of Greeks and Romans. A lot of time, I think that's another introduction, a lot of time is covered in the Bible, thousands of years. A lot of how they lived in the Old Testament, there are still those that live that same nomadic lifestyle in that area today. But you look as you go from different powers, different empires come into play, they come to rule, culture changes, and transitions from one language to the other, different lifestyles, advancement of technology, all these different changes. And it's that all that is in the background when we read the Bible. But when you study manners and customs, that a lot of that, kind of gets drawn to the front when you learn about it, and you're a little more aware of it as you read the Bible. All right, so we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll start part 1, family life, by studying about clothing.
Oh.
There we go.
Okay. All right, clothing. All right, the wardrobe, page 10. The wardrobe of a person living in Bible times was fairly basic. A loincloth, maybe, was worn beneath a tunic, and there was some form of headwear. Right? And you get this, footwear and coat were options. Footwear was optional. Okay. The slight variations in this pattern during Bible times were in color, material, and style, rather than in basic provision, because cloths, or clothes rather, of this kind were best for a relatively hot climate. Okay? That is something to definitely keep in mind, the climate in that area. But it did vary quite a bit in different areas, but it's mostly a rather hot climate. So footwear, you're working, I don't know about y'all, you're hardly ever going to catch me walking around the house or outside without some type of footwear. But coats, that's more so like not like a coat what we think of, but it was more like a cloak. Nothing like when you think of a coat like what we wear. I continue in there. Paul uses the tunic held in at the waist by a girdle as a metaphor for the lifestyle of God's chosen people. Okay, so two things I will point out of what we've read so far. All right, footwear and coat being optional clothing pieces. All right, bear that in mind. Maybe put a dot by it or something like that. And then where it talks about Paul using the tunic as a metaphor of us, girding up our loins, as a metaphor for the lifestyle of God's chosen people. I'd note that as well. Definitely as we go through here, we're going to be in our Bibles, so definitely be ready to turn. But I'll continue there, and where Paul uses the tunic, held in at the waist by a girdle as a metaphor for the lifestyle of God's chosen people. There reference Colossians 3:12. We'll look at that. And everyone would have understood that he was talking about basics. That's something that everyone would have understood. That metaphor, that picture he was given as using the tunic, all right, held in by the waist by a girdle. All right, we're also going to look at that reference, what it would have looked like when they would have girded their loins. But that's a metaphor that everyone would have understood that he was writing to. He knew his audience. Even though he was very well educated, he kept his audience in mind and used pictures that they would be familiar with and understand. So Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. It's going to take me a couple weeks to get used to this Bible. I'll switch to this one for teaching. For a second, I thought they left Colossians out. Colossians 3:12. Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long suffering. So the picture there that he's giving is that of them, girding their loins, with that girdle, which is kind of like a belt. And gathering up the loose cloth, that was part of their tunic, because that could get in the way. If you're getting ready to run or to work, having that tunic down at your knees, maybe a little lower, that's going to get in the way. So pull it up and guard it with that girdle, that belt, and get to work. That's the lifestyle of God's chosen people. All right, we're not to be lazy. And when it comes time to work, you need to get to it and get focused in and get ready. All right, so the undergarment, continuing there in the next paragraph, the undergarment, when worn, was either in the form of a loincloth or was a small waist slip. Peter was wearing the loincloth when he was naked or stripped for work in the family fishing boat. It was not uncommon when the fishermen came in to port or when they were out on the water for them to be down to their loincloth. Okay, they didn't wear a whole bunch of clothes and something on top, headwear or something, so they wouldn't get sunburned too bad. But when it says there in John 21:7 that he was naked, all right, he was not, in his birthday suit. He was stripped down for work. All right, he had that loincloth. All right, and that's that John 21:7 verse. All right, Jesus was crucified wearing only the loincloth because the soldiers, had already removed his tunic. Now that is one reference we'll look at, that John 19:23. John 19 verse 23. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and made 4 parts, to every soldier a part, and also his coat. Now the coat was without seam, woven from the top throughout. We're going to look at that again here in a minute, that second part, talking about his coat. But they had taken his tunic and divided it in 4 parts, or his garments, other than his coat, and obviously they left him in his loincloth, and made 4 parts of it. Every soldier got a piece. The death of the cross was a humiliating death as well, not just a brutal one. All right, so our first object of clothing we're going to look at here is the tunic. The tunic was the essential garment. It was made from 2 pieces of material, seamed, so that the seam came horizontally at waist level. When stripes were woven into the material on the loom, they fell vertically in the finished article. In many aspects, the tunic was like a sack. A V-shaped opening was cut for the head, and slits were made in the 2 corners for the arms. A very plain piece of clothing. That next sentence there, a new tunic was normally sold without the V opening so that it could be proved to be new. Okay, so if you bought a tunic and it had that V cut already, that opening for your head to go through, it could be secondhand, especially if it already had the slits for the arms. Okay, but another thing is, I don't think this is in the book, but it also helps, kind of put them out quickly. One size fits all, and then you just, depending on how big their head was, you can make the cut for their head according to size. You might have someone that was more built, like Brother Anthony, that needed bigger holes for their arms to get through, all their muscles to get through. And but that material, this is where it gets interesting to me. The material could be of wool, linen, or even cotton, according to the wealth of the wearer. So what your tunic was made of, kind of proved who you were. That you were higher status, you were more wealthier. Tunics made of sackcloth or goat's hair were very uncomfortable because they caused skin irritation. They were therefore worn in times of mourning and repentance. We read that a lot in the Bible. We hear about sackcloth. One example that I think of right off the bat is Jonah. I love the book of Jonah. Let's see if I can find it. So there, Jonah, when he finally finds himself in Nineveh, and the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go into Nineveh, the great city, and preach unto it the preaching that I bid thee. All right, so that's always important when you look at the prophets, all right, and those that are messengers for the Lord. The word comes from Him. That's what. Well, another thing was that what these men were preaching came to be true, but that was one guarantee of they were who they said they were, prophet of the Lord. But he says, preach what I bid thee, what I give thee. So Jonah arose and went unto Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceeding great city of 3 days' journey. And Jonah began to enter into the city a day's journey, and he cried and said, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." You talk about a short sermon. Half a verse, and it's real simple. Yet 40 days, in 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And so what do the people of Nineveh do? They believed God and proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them, from the royalty to the peasants. They all put on sackcloth. So there's one example in the Bible where we read about sackcloth being worn during a time of mourning and repentance. Repentance in this case. But that's one thing I always, Jonah really went through it to preach half a verse worth of sermon. He went through a lot of trouble not to do that. But of course, there was, I've heard some commentators say, Jonah probably had a really hard heart toward the Ninevites because they were naturally the enemy of the people of Israel, God's people. And here the Lord is wanting Jonah to go and to preach against them, preach unto them what he would have him to say. And it ends up being half a verse in the Bible. I just always find that comical, but at times it doesn't take much to get people to turn away, to realize where they stand with God, and get them to turn away from that and toward Him in repentance. Okay. One thing I'll point out here on this picture here, it says men's clothing, left to right. A laborer with his tunic tucked into his girdle. Right, that's girding up your loins. Right, that's what it would have looked like after they had taken. You see what he's got around his waist as his belt. He would have pulled it, reached toward the back, pulled it up, and then put his girdle on, and then let it fall. And he's ready to work, ready to fight, go to war, have a good scrap, or run an errand. Who knows? And then they fell in the middle. A man wearing a thick woolen cloak over his tunic, and the guy on the right, a wealthy man with a colorful fringed cloak. Color in your clothing, especially as intricate as that, with all the gold, the yellow, and the red too, especially, that was a definite proof that you had money, you were wealthy. It was bright colors in your clothes. All right, men's tunics were normally short and colored. Women's tunics were ankle length and blue, with embroidered edges to the V-neck, which in some cases identified the village or region of the wearer. Okay, so that embroidered edge along where the hole for your neck to go through was, a lot of times what was the pattern that was there would have been used to identify, what region you came from. It would have been differing patterns depending on where you came from. So like the guy here, where his embroidery is on his cloak, the guy to the right, the wealthy fella, that would have been significant, specific to where he came from. All right, finishing out that paragraph on page 12, the tunic, all right, this is the one that we read about in John 19:23. The tunic that Jesus wore must have been one of the latest in fashion because it was without the center seam. Looms able to accommodate the full length of the tunic were invented only in his lifetime. So that what we read where they took his garments and divided them into four parts, and then his coat, right, or what he was wearing on the outside was, it's described there. Let me turn back there so I don't misquote it. John 19:23. That last part there, and also his coat. Now the coat was without seam, woven from the top throughout. So his whole cloak was one piece. Okay, it wasn't two parts. It was all one piece. And the loom that would have been able to do that was only invented during his lifetime. So that's when you start seeing that full cloth cloak or coat with one seam in it. That only comes into fashion at the time of Jesus. So that's when you see that introduced. So like I said, bringing that out, you now see that see the advancement of technologies that's happening during the time of the Bible. That doesn't always pop out when you first read it until you look into it, like what we've just done. So there's a couple of these little blue boxes that have some good information in them. Back on page 10, men's clothes and women's clothes. Because the tunic was so basic, it was identical for men and women, except that the man's tunic was often shorter at the length of the knee, and the woman's was often longer, ankle length, and blue. The prohibition against exchanging clothes had its origin in the sexual stimulation that was part of the Canaanite religion. The Canaanite religion was full of perversions and sexual deviancy, and it was a very big part of their religion. So exchanging clothes, there was a prohibition against that among the Jews. That was because of it was related to the Canaanite religion, especially the sexual part of the religion. So that's where that prohibition, we read that in Deuteronomy 22, verse 5. We'll turn over there and read that. Deuteronomy 22, verse 5. Deuteronomy 22, verse 5. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. And that was in opposition to the Canaanite religion. The Lord didn't, want his people to be a part of that or associated with that at all. But that's something that's pretty prevalent nowadays. All right, and then that little box pertaining to Joseph's coat of many colors. Joseph received a tunic of many pieces. The additional pieces were probably long sleeves that were a nuisance and got in the way when work was to be done. When women had long wide sleeves, they tied them behind their necks so that their arms would be free. This indicated that Joseph was not expected to do heavy work. He was a chosen heir to rule over the family. Of course, Rachel was Jacob's, that's the woman that he worked for. He ended up getting tricked into getting Leah too. Then he had to work some more for Rachel. But Joseph was definitely his favorite son. That's made very clear in the Bible. His brothers resented him for it. But that coat of many colors, the color was more than likely prevalent in his sleeves. Okay, and long sleeves, meant that they got in the way of hard work. So that we can get from that, what we read there in Genesis 37:3, that hard work probably wasn't asked of Joseph. But anyway, let's see. The tunic, there, that second paragraph of page 12. The tunic was held to the waist by a girdle made of leather or coarse cloth. Sometimes the girdle was slit to make a pocket for money or other personal possessions. Mark chapter 6, verse 8 is a reference for that. We'll read that next sentence too, though, and look at both of those verses. The girdle was also handy for the insertion of weapons or tools. So that Mark chapter 6, verse 8 reference, let's look at that. Mark chapter 6, verse 8, this is where Jesus, he had been rejected by his countrymen at the beginning of the chapter, and now he's sending out the 12. Verse 8, he says, and he commanded them that they should take nothing for their journey, save a staff only, no scrip, no bread, no money in their purse. Okay, so that purse that it's speaking of there is their girdle. Okay, they would have had an opening in that for them to slide money into. Definitely not like a handbag or anything like that, or a Merce man purse. All right, that verse, 1 Samuel 25:23. Or excuse me, 25:13, if I didn't say that correctly. Okay, this is shortly after David has that chance to kill Saul there at the opening of the cave when Saul is relieving himself. David has a chance to kill him, but he does, and he spares him. Then Samuel dies at the beginning of chapter 25. Then we get down to verse 13. And David said unto his men, Gird ye on every man his sword. And they girded on every man his sword. And David also girded on his sword. And there went up after David about 400 men, and 200 abode by the stuff. Does that say stuff in
It
your
says,
Bible?
it
It
says
does.
stuff here,
Okay.
so I was like,
Oh, King
Stuff.
James.
Buy the stuff.
yeah. I was like, because I was thinking, is this like staff?
That's interesting. That's this is where it's I think Nabal's vineyard. Yeah. All right. There, after that 1 Samuel 25:13 reference, when men needed freedom to work or for running, they lifted the hem at the bottom of their tunic and tucked it into the girdle to gain greater freedom of movement. It was called girding up the loins, and the phrase became a metaphor for preparedness. Peter, I misspoke earlier. Paul was referencing, he's referencing that, but the gird up your loins is referenced there in 1 Peter 1:13. Peter, for example, commends clear thinking by advising Christians to gird up the loins of their minds, prepare their minds. A lot of, even for the early fledgling church, young church, there was still a lot of threat in reference to heresies and untruth coming into the church, even at its beginning. So Peter commends them to clear thinking, to think on things, not just accept everything at face value. A lot of people do that nowadays. They hear something, it's interesting or exciting, and they just take it at face value and never look into it for themselves. That 1 Peter 1:13, I'd make a note of that, where that sentence, Peter, for example, commends clear thinking by advising Christians to gird up the loins of their minds. I'd put a little dot or something by that. That might be something I'd put on this list. All right, continuing there after that reference. The women lifted the hem of their tunics too, in their case to carry things from one place to another. At the end of the day, there were no night clothes to wear. The girdle was loosened, and each person lay down in his or her tunic. So you wear it all day, and then at the end of the day, you take your girdle off, your belt, and that's what you would sleep in, your loose tunic. But I can't imagine the relief of taking that girdle off after working all day in the heat. Finally get some relief, like when you have a really good meal and you undo your buckle and you get a little bit of relief. Anyway, that's what. All right. The next piece of clothing we have here is the cloak. When people were wealthy enough to afford it, or when cold weather made it a necessity, a cloak, or as often referred to in the Bible, a mantle, was worn on top of the tunic. Cloaks were made in two forms. In the country where warmth was important, it was made by wrapping thick woolen material around the body, seaming it at the shoulders, and providing slits for the arms to go through. For many people, the cloak was their only form of protection. So even if taken in pledge for a loan, it had to be returned to the owner before nightfall for sleeping purposes. For the same reason, a Jewish court of law would never award a cloak as a payment for a debt or something like that. Let's see. We'll look at that reference there. Exodus chapter 22. Exodus 22, verses 26 through 27. Now, this is in the laws regarding usury, or like what would be like interest on a loan or something like that. Exodus 22, 26 through 27. If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver it unto him by that the sun goeth down, by the time the sun goes down. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin. Wherein shall he sleep? And I'll point that out why he says that. And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. Okay. So if it was taken as a pledge for a loan, you had to return it, all right, by nightfall, because for a lot of shepherds, all right, this cloak or what they wore over their heads, like this fella on the left, page 13, it was big enough to be used as a tent, or they could pitch it to where it was covering for them at night, all right, to offer them protection. All right, so that's where it says there, wherein shall he sleep if he doesn't have it, okay? So we'll go ahead and look at the caption for the picture down here at the bottom. So typical dress of people of Bible times from left to right. There you have the shepherd there, or I was pointing out the guy on page 13, the shepherd's this fella right here, obviously with the sheep. What he's got on his head is what it would have been large enough for him to pick. It wouldn't have been like no 5-star hotel or nothing like that. It would have been big enough for him to get into, maybe lay down under. It wasn't no 4-person tent that you get from Academy Sports and Goods or anything like that. All right, then you have the fellow next to him, a warrior. Now, one thing, what do you see a lack of? All right, when you think of like a warrior, what do you think? Usually, what I think of is like a knight. Okay, heavy armor, plate armor, but this was long before that was a thing. Okay, so that's the extent of his armor. That leather girdle, that helmet that hopefully is made out of leather at least, and his shield and his sword. All right, but that was about what a warrior looked like during that time. It wasn't no knight or anything with plate or chainmail. Very light armor. They moved quick. That was one of the main reasons. And then next to him is a peasant, and then beside him a peasant woman and child, and then you have the rich man, who for some reason looks the maddest out of all. And it is a very interesting sandal design too. All right. Left off there at that last paragraph on page 13, where we're starting. The other form of cloak was like a loose dressing gown with wide sleeves. All right, now remember, if you had wide sleeves, that was going to get in the way of doing any type of work. Okay, so anytime that you get that picture, just remember that's going to get in the way of doing work. So it's probably going to be a wealthy person wearing something like this. When made of silk, it was a luxury garment, and a wealthy person would never think of going out of doors without one, without his dressing gown, cloak made of silk. The Pharisees wore blue fringes at the bottom of their cloaks so that they could be seen to be keeping the law recorded in Numbers 15, 38-39. Because this practice tended to be ostentatious, it was condemned by Jesus. Ostentatious, making a show out of it. There, we'll look at that. Numbers 15, 38. We'll start the reading. Number 15, 38, 39. So this portion from verse 37 to 41 is actually in reference to the law regarding wearing fringes as a remembrance. Now, there was purpose behind it when it was instituted, okay, as a law. So verse 38, speak unto the children of Israel and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a riband of blue. And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them, and that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye used to go a-whoring. So, initially, all right, that riband of blue on the fringe of their garments was meant to aid in remembering the law of the Lord. But as time went on, it became a kind of a mockery. Okay, it was more so, look at me. I've got the fringes on my garments. Look at me. I'm doing it to remember the Lord, but it wasn't for that purpose. Rather, it was bad enough to where the Lord condemned it. There in Matthew chapter 23, verse 5.
So, what about the blue? Okay, so they're supposed to wear blue fringes and stuff. Women often wore blue tunics. What was blue?
Well, blue, trying to remember what the significance of that was. Let me look at that, because I don't have a clear answer for you on that. Let me look at that. I'm trying to get an answer. Probably a good question for the future, too. Alright, so that reference in Matthew 23:5, where the Lord condemns that, he says, but all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. So those fringes, they went from being a ribbon to being, the bottom quarter of their garment. But it wasn't drawing them any closer to the Lord. If anything, all their traditions and the little things they added to the law was pushing them away from the Lord. They were getting caught up in the practice and the religion rather than the relationship with the Lord. Alright, it was probably this bottom part of Jesus' cloak that the woman who was healed of a hemorrhage or a blood disease, as it says in the Bible, wanted to touch with the bottom of his garment. That's a couple of chapters back, Matthew chapter 9, verse 20. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. Alright, footwear. The poor often walked barefoot, but others wore simple sandals. A sole was made from a piece of cowhide to match the shape of the foot. So it would have been shaped to fit. You would have had your shoe made right there in front of you. It wouldn't have been a long process. It was attached to the foot by a long thong that passed through the sole between the large and second toe and was tied through the ankle. We'll look at that reference here in a minute, see what it has to say. Otherwise, the thong linked together loops that had been made around the sole, crossing over and over the top of the foot. Slippers were also in use. Okay, let me look at Luke 3:16. Luke chapter 3, verse 16. This is John's testimony concerning Christ. John answered, saying unto them all, I indeed baptize you with water, but one mightier than I cometh, the latchet of whose shoes I am not worthy to unloose. He shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost and with fire. Okay. So that was what he was referencing. There was his sandal. So there were different variations of shoes, or he didn't wear any. But it could have been as simple as just taking that piece of cowhide, putting your foot down on it, and then cutting it out and running a needle or something with a thong of leather or a strip of leather, through your big toe, wrapping it around your ankle. And it obviously would have been anchored somewhere in the back as well. But possibly nothing very more advanced than modern day flip-flops, but made out of cowhide. So nothing really extravagant unless you had something like what these people on this page were wearing. But slippers were also in use, so that's That's good to know. All right, the picture there, leather sandals from Roman times discovered during excavations outside the ancient city of Jericho. All right, the cloak and the tunic, that's something I should have read before we looked at footwear. They're in the little blue box. The cloak and the tunic, okay, we've got some scriptures to read here. Matthew chapter 5, Matthew chapter 5, verse 40. Matthew 5, verse 40. This is during the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says there, "And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy, or excuse me, take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also." Okay, and that the portion of scripture where he's talking here, he's talking about loving your enemies. So, which to a lot of people, when you love those that hate you, you know, you're the one that's kind of considered, you know, insane or different or weird because you love the people, or you don't hate the people that hate you. You know, that's different, especially in today's world. All right, then Luke chapter 6, verse 29 rather. Goodness gracious. I need to have my prescription checked. Luke 6:29. Also, the Lord here is speaking of loving your enemies. "And unto him that smiteth thee on the one cheek, offer also the other. And him that taketh away thy cloak, forbid not to take thy coat also." All right, so if he's going to take your cloak, and he's going to take your coat also, let him have it. Okay, Jesus hadn't got it wrong, and he was not contradicting himself. In the first case, Jesus was talking about the law, and they've already got like 6, including this one, so they got to look for it.
Okay, brother, you should be recording.
All right, very good. All right. All right.
Washing clothes.
Oh, yeah. The picture here, well, we'll look at cleaning clothes first. Clothes were cleaned by allowing the swift current of a stream to pass through the coarse woven cloth, washing the dirt out and away, or else by placing the wet clothes on flat stones and pounding out the dirt. David used the picture of washing clothes as a symbol of the action needed to cleanse away his sin. Soap was made either from olive oil or from a vegetable alkali.
What's that called?
We're about to look it up, because I don't know. Look it up real quick. Alkaline. I mean, I know there's like alkaline battery or something like that.
That's like battery.
Yeah, I feel like it's some kind of non-acidic base. Fat.
Okay, sounds like you might be probably know. Alkaline. A chemical compound that neutralizes or effervesces, neutralizes with acids and turns litmus blue. Typically a caustic or corrosive substance of this kind, such as lime or soda. Okay.
That's even better.
But it's a chemical compound that neutralizes, or that other word, with acids and turns litmus blue. All right, but obviously it aids in the cleaning of clothes, and it's made from vegetables. All right, so I would definitely note that first part of the paragraph there, or the only paragraph about cleaning clothes here. Clothes were cleaned by allowing the swift current of a stream to pass through them, okay, or by placing the wet clothes on flat stones and pounding out the dirt, okay. So there's 2 methods there, all right. Definitely note them. Definitely commit those to the memory bank. All right, and then we got a picture here. The fast-flowing waters of the River Jordan. Clothes were cleaned by allowing the swift current of a stream to pass through the cloth. Also, this reference here we have in the Psalms. Psalm 51, verse 2. David confesses sin and he prays for forgiveness here. Verse 2, wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. So the picture there is that of washing clothes, all right? Where you take the wet clothes out and you beat them on the rocks to clean them. And that's the picture he had in mind. I definitely relate. Okay, page 16. Basic clothing. Clothes were not easy to come by for most people and were very costly. The poor had only the clothes they stood up in. It was therefore realistic to trade a person. It was therefore realistic to trade a person for a pair of shoes. And it was quite revolutionary for John the Baptist to tell people to give away spare coats. It is therefore interesting to see that in their codification of the law. Let's stop there for a minute and look at this information before. All right, so clothes were very costly. Okay, so the poor, what you saw them in was more than likely the only clothes they had. So here in Amos, that's in the Old Testament, chapter 2, verse 6. Let's see here. Amos chapter 2, verse 6. This is God's judgment upon Moab. He says here, but I will send a fire upon Moab, and it shall devour the palaces of Kerioth, and Moab shall die with... Okay, hang on. Is this the right reference? Amos 2, verse 6. Okay, help if I read the right verse. Verse 6. This is God's judgment upon Israel. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they sold the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of shoes. Yeah. Therefore, realistic to trade a person for a pair of shoes because of the value of clothing. All right, and then very revolutionary for what John the Baptist was telling people to do, to give away their spare coats. Because, that is definitely a garment that not everybody had, probably the largest, most expensive piece of clothing. So to give them away, if they had spare ones, I definitely raised some eyebrows, has people looking at me funny when he said that. Luke 3:11, he answered and saith unto them, he that hath 2 coats, let him impart to him that hath none, and he that hath meat, let him do likewise. So you got 2 coats, give one away. If you got extra meat, do the same thing, give it away. Okay. It is therefore interesting to see that in their codification of the law in the 1st century A.D., the Jews gave a list of clothes that might be rescued from a burning house on the Sabbath. Okay, so remember, you're not supposed to work, or if you do, very little. I mean, they even had a certain amount of steps you could take on the Sabbath. You had to be really calculating where you went on the Sabbath if you went anywhere, because you could only take so many steps without, breaking the law, their law. So they made a list of things that you could, put effort into, work for, to rescue from a house fire. Okay, and a coat was one of them. So interesting, because the list indicates the value of clothes. Okay, remember, very valuable. All right, and of garments. Mentions garments that were familiar at the time. The list is divided into 2 sections, for men and for women. Children wore scaled down versions of adult clothes. So there are lists specific for what men could rescue, I guess, from house fires, and what women could. Okay, many of the names are Greek names for the garments, but the basic patterns of clothing are exactly the same. So important were clothes that it was a sign of intense grief or mourning to tear them into pieces. You know, I've seen young girls, you know, be devastated by something happening to their shoes or clothes, but I don't know why. I just never understood it much. But of course, I don't buy high dollar shoes or clothes or anything like that, and they wear, you know, the trendy stuff that boys are bad nowadays too. My cousin, it's not even one of my younger brothers. It's not uncommon for him to send me a picture of a pair of shoes he's getting, and the price tag on it was like $150. And I'm like, what in the world are you spending money? Or I said, what in the world are you doing spending your parents' money on shoes like that? I said, buy you a pair and me a pair, you spend less money. I said, if you let me pick them out. But in this time, okay, with clothes, just even to have clothes, it was very costly. So it was much value put on clothes. Okay. Let's see. Let's look at this here at the right here on page 16. This picture, the caption is to the left. A sculpted figure of a Roman in military officer's costume. I don't know why they call it costume. It most definitely was not a Halloween costume or something like that. It was real long. But so that's what you would have, a Roman soldier, that's what he would have been looking at. Okay, then we have here in the little blue box, got some information about God's armor. And the picture there with it is a sculpture of the uniform torso of a Roman soldier. So where did Paul spend a bit of his time?
Soldier, right? No, he's in prison.
So he was in prison, found himself in prison a couple times. And who were the ones in authority? All right, the Romans, okay, soldiers, yes. So he spent a lot of time in their company. Okay, so when he writes about the armor of God, okay, he's basing it off the armor of a Roman soldier. Okay, so that's why it's pointing out the Romans here in their armor. So here in God's armor, the little info box, Paul refers to the clothing worn by a soldier. He combines Isaiah's prophecy of the armor of God from Isaiah 59:16 and 17 with what he knows of the Roman soldier. Underneath the soldier's armor was a foundation garment to hold him in, so that the armor, the leather jacket, and skirt covered with metal plates could fit on top. So he may have worn like a light tunic underneath. Probably wouldn't have been sleeved. If it was, it would have been short sleeves. So here, Roman soldiers had hobnailed sandals that gripped the ground well, so kind of like cleats, but sandals with spikes on the bottom. Paul uses the description to say that the devil will not be able to bring Christians down if they are strictly honest, utterly just in their dealings, and not easily upset. Just something to figure out there's a lot. There's a lot of other requirements for us as well in the New Testament. Add to this a salvation that enables them to live according to God's standard, with access to and trust in what God has said, and the Christian is well protected. And of course, what you have there in Ephesians 6:10 through 17 is the text of the armor of God. Okay, and when Paul was writing Ephesians, he was in prison. So probably that's one of my favorite lessons to teach on is the armor of God. Of course, there's a lot of songs and activities that go well along with it. It's really good lessons for kids. But one thing I like to point out, let's turn that. Well, actually, let's look at that Isaiah 59 text first. Isaiah chapter 59, verse 16 and 17.
Yeah, a picture of it right here.
There you go. (59, 16 and 17). All right, and this chapter here is talking about how sin separates us from God. 16 and 17, and he saw that there was no man and wondered, wait, hang on, let me make sure I'm reading right. Okay. And he saw that there was no man and wondered that there was no intercessor. Therefore his arm brought salvation unto him, and his righteousness it sustained him. For he put on righteousness as a breastplate, and an helmet of salvation upon his head. And he put on the garments of vengeance for clothing, and was clad with zeal as a cloak. You know, a lot of people aren't familiar with that parts of the armor of God are referenced in the Old Testament in Isaiah. I know I wasn't until I did an in-depth study of the armor of God. I did a sermon series on it years ago. And then, of course, we have Paul here speaking to it in Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6. Verses, we'll start with 10. Verse 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand, therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Verse 16. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Now, when it comes to the armor of God, usually when people read their text for the lesson or the sermon, they stop there in verse 17. Okay? I don't fault them, but I include verse 18 there. Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. And it continues on there, but verse 18, praying always. Okay? Prayer, and this, when I teach this lesson, I bring this out. Prayer very much is a tool, a weapon that the Christian does not utilize. Okay? And, I've heard it said when teaching on the armor of God, as you put on each piece of the armor, do it in prayer, But wearing the whole armor of God gives us full protection. Okay, and that shield of faith, it says there, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Because Satan, he comes at us, he knows the Bible. Satan knows the Word of God. He even tried to use it against Jesus, who is the Word. And, of course, he ain't going to trick Jesus on that. Jesus replied and put Satan in his place. But we need to be familiar with the Word of God as well, because faith cometh by hearing. Our faith grows by us hearing the Word of God. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. Okay. Any questions, comments on anything we've looked at so far? What did you ask me earlier?
About the blue.
Okay. All right. Let me write that down so I remember to look at it here in a little bit. Because I sure enough totally forgot that. But other than that one, which I'm going to look at, do y'all got any questions or comments? Okay. Alright, well, let's push on. Ornamentation. In addition to clothes, there was heavy personal ornamentation by makeup, ornaments, and hair treatment. So important was this to the women of New Testament times that Christians were warned to ornament themselves with a meek and quiet spirit. Makeup was derived either from coal, green copper carbonate, or from galena. I'm just going to pronounce that like I think it's pronounced, which is black lead sulfide. All right, quite a few references, or a couple references there, and then some stuff back on the other page that we're going to look at. But addition to clothes, there was heavy personal ornamentation by makeup, ornaments, and hair treatment. I'd note that. But it was very, very prevalent, very important to the women of New Testament times. And of course, anything like that is going to be, I understand, wanting to look good. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Look presentable. But to really do it for the purpose of drawing attention to oneself, that's the opposite of how, a Christian ought to be. But, Paul, got that right. There's Peter, 1 Peter chapter 3. Christians are warned against that, rather to ornament themselves with a meek and quiet spirit. We'll look at that verse, or those verses in 1 Peter chapter 3. Verses 3 through 4. 1 Peter 3:3. Whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting of the hair, and of wearing of gold, or of putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. So more important than how you look on the outside is the ornamentation of a meek and quiet spirit, which is to God of far greater price, of far greater worth. Okay, then got a verse here. It's in reference to the maybe the makeup here, Ezekiel, back in the Old Testament. Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 40. Here in the chapter surrounding this, it's a lot about the sins of Jerusalem, the people's corruption, and the lewdness of Jerusalem and also Samaria. And then verse 40, we read here, and furthermore that ye have sent for men to come from far, unto whom a messenger was sent, and lo, they came, for whom thou didst wash thyself, paintest thy face, and deckest thyself with ornaments. You just got a little King James sometimes. So these ones that were coming, they washed themselves, prettied themselves up. Let's see. Well, he's definitely, I believe, condemning some practices here in this text. So it wasn't something that was, new in the New Testament times. It's something, getting yourself all prettied up for whoever these messengers were here. I'm not 100% aware of the exact context of what's happening here in verse 23, or what that's in reference to. But, the Lord, it was being condemned there. Okay, that second paragraph on page 18, Isaiah describes in great detail the ornamentation used in his day. We'll look at that here in a minute. Many of that reference there, that is, many of the earrings, bracelets, and pendants were set with precious stones, but it is extremely difficult to identify the exact nature of the stone from the ancient languages. Oils were used as a base for pigments that colored fingernails and toenails. Cosmetics were applied either with a finger or with a small wooden spatula. Men frequently wore a ring on the finger or on a chain around the neck, but the importance of such rings was more for sealing purposes than for decoration. Sealing letters and wax would have had their seal upon it. In Old Testament times, the hair was an important feature. It was seldom cut. Okay, so let's look at some of the stuff we have here. Back on page 17, haven't looked at that page yet. At the top, we have a relief from a Greco-Roman sarcophagus showing Roman citizens in typical men's and women's, there's that word costume again, costume. Can't really gather a whole bunch from what we see here, but you definitely get an idea for the style just based off the, I guess, really it just looks like they're wearing robes. But to the right, I believe that's a woman, maybe based off it looks like she's wearing a veil or some covering over her head. Okay, the priest's clothing. Priest wore a linen garment over the top of the tunic, perhaps to keep it clean. It was called an ephod or ephod. I've heard it pronounced both ways. So 1 Samuel 2, verse 18 and 19, we'll look at that. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 18 and 19. Alright, 1 Samuel 2, verse 18. But Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. So Hannah is Samuel's mother. You know, she was not able to have a child, and you know, if let's read that here. In verse 9 of chapter 1. So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli, the priest, sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Basically saying she poured out her heart to the Lord. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. I mean, that was something, a child is what she had longed to have. Of course, she had been mocked in her husband's home because she was, hadn't been able to bear a child, birth a child yet. But that there is the vow she makes to the Lord that she will, if the Lord gives her, I like how she puts it, a man-child, that she basically there at the end, I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head, kind of like the Nazarite vow there. But there in 1 Samuel 2, 18 and 19, this is where we see Samuel has been born and he's grown up. He's now working in the temple, and Hannah would come and see him every year. And it says here, she made him a little coat and brought it to him from year to year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. So that was what that coat, or excuse me, what they wore as Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. And then his mother brought him a little coat. All right, continuing there, the high priest wore special clothes, but they still followed the basic provision. We might look over at that, page 301 reference. The tunic was blue, the ephod was richly embroidered, and carried a jewel-encrusted pouch containing 2 lots from which the will of God might be ascertained. The cloak was white. Okay. He wore a special turban on the head, as you see below. Very specific in what the high priest was to wear, given in the Bible. But that illustration on page 301, I think, is just a picture of I think it's a complete illustration of his outfit, I think. Yeah. Page 301. Now, one thing I noted in that illustration on page 301 is he's not wearing shoes. And here, when he would have taken his shoes off before going into the Holy of Holies, most definitely. All right. Of course, you get a good picture there on 301 of that jewel encrusted breastplate as well. Sure is a pretty thing. 12 different precious stones. Okay, so here we have this list of clothes, men's and women's costume. That's my only complaint about this book. In regards to the clothes, there's always the word costume. So it has the words here. I want to say in the Hebrew, because that's what it looks like. I don't think those are Greek words. But here, a long garment, a short garment, depending on what your status was. Okay, if you were wealthy, you would have been wearing a long sleeve garment. If you were a working person, it would have definitely been a short sleeve garment. Then you had a linen undergarment with short sleeves. I guess that's all kind of the same. Maybe the tunic is speaking of there. Then you had your girdle, your belt, purse, which would have been part of the girdle, breast scarf, head scarf, and that cap, which would have just been probably a basic piece of leather or something of the sort on the head. Then you had a hat, a scarf to go over the head, breeches, pants, and then stockings, sandals, or shoes. Okay. And then the women, long linen undergarment, short undergarment, robe, girdle, or colored girdle. This shore is a lot shorter than the men.
Breeches.
Oh,
Breeches.
breeches.
Yeah. When I think of breeches, I think of like those like red and white striped, or is it black and white striped, like pants that like pirates wear. That's what I think of. I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about. When I hear breeches, that's what I think.
And that was a long time. Breeches.
Breeches.
Okay, so on page 18, there at the top, the Roman women's cosmetics here, mirrors and items of adornment are depicted on this panel dedicated by the female officials of a religious cult. I don't know, half of what's on that panel. I think that's a comb at the bottom in the middle. Maybe a wash basin there in the center.
Compact, a mirror, bottles of perfume or something.
Muffin paint.
I feel like that's like an eyeshadow color
Yeah,
palette.
maybe.
Oh, a palette.
Mhm.
I see flip flops.
Yeah, it might be
Yeah.
a thing for makeup to go in.
Yeah.
Go in on.
And then what you have right here to the left of the wash, what I reckon is a wash basin. You see that little, looks like a spoon, that's the spatula, or what they would
Yeah.
apply the liquid with.
With the nail. The wooden scratch.
Okay, our last little bit here on page 18, covering women's heads. Respectable women went out with their heads covered and wore veils. Only prostitutes displayed their faces and showed off their hair in order to attract men. Paul therefore tells the Christians that if a woman in the church will not wear a veil, then she should be shorn. But it is best that her head be covered. Even when Christians have liberty in the practice of their faith, they are not to shock propriety. Of course, keep in mind the culture of the day. And culture has, I'm about to say, advanced. I don't know if the day we're living in right now would be considered advanced when it comes to what people wear. But definitely a huge change. But then again, when you go over to this area of the world, it's still very much the same. And as you go further west, things get a lot more free-spirited. And not, a lot of times not for the best. Okay, and then to the right, you have a woman's costume. A peasant woman there at the front to the left. Notice her simple leather sandals. And a wealthy woman to the right. Both women have their heads covered. So they're both respectable.
What's a peasant?
Lower class, you know. Not homeless, but I imagine the homeless would have been probably grouped with that classification, but lower class. I ain't gonna lie, those sandals that the peasant woman's wearing looks like the exact pair of sandals my dad has been wearing for the last 10 years. He's got a pair of leather Croc sandals that he has worn since, man alive, at least 10 years. He's still wearing. The sole is there's a hole that goes all the way through the leather to the sole on his right sandal. They're made by Croc, though Crocs. They last a long time.
Yeah, 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Just to
But
have one hole.
yeah, thankfully it's not through the sole yet, but it's probably well on its way. Okay, well, we're done with that. So when I first taught this class, we did this. You know, I told them we're going to have a test every week, and that next week we came in, and I gave them a test for chapter 1, and it wasn't bad, but I felt bad because they had no idea what to expect to be on the test. Of course, chapter 10 isn't a long chapter compared to others. That's what made me start handing out a study guide, because this is a short chapter. There are some chapters that are 20 pages long, like the religion chapter, it's like 40 pages long, I think, maybe more. So I was like, I feel like that was kind of unfair, especially, you know, like for the shorter chapters where we're going to be expected to test a week after. So I started handing out a study guide, but we're not testing every week like what we did then. So probably every 2 weeks, I'll hand out the study guide for the chapters that we've covered. And like I said, I'll be making notes, pointing out stuff that is going to be on the test. Not all of it. I won't always remember or catch it, but it will be on the study guide that you get. You'll have a whole week to go over that. So just, you know, over the week, maybe take a gander through the chapter again, just kind of refamiliarize yourself with it, and I mean, you'll have a whole week with the study guide as well. And like I said, the study guide is pretty much going to be the test. Okay, I'll take what's on the study guide, convert it into questions, ranging from multiple choice, fill in the blank, and short answers. So, And there'll be a good number of questions on the test, but that's if you think about it, it's a good thing, okay, to have more questions because they count for less, okay? If I gave a test with 5 questions and you missed 1, that's an 8.
Yeah.
All right, so more questions is good, but I'll try and keep it. I'm not going to try and do 50 questions on a test. All right, but maybe in the 30 range. So covering 2 or so chapters. So, but anywho.
Sounds good.
And I'll have a printout for y'all next week for what's going to be required for your research paper and your presentation. So, on weeks that because there are some chapters where we'll move through them quickly. On those weeks that we finish early, we might spend the rest of the class period. I'll dismiss y'all, but to the library. Okay, and you can utilize the rest of the class period there, researching, or you can use it for another class if you need to. So, I'm not real picky on that. I remember when I was in high school, I had an English teacher, and there are a lot of teachers like this. I don't know why, but if you pull out and start working on assignments from another class, they get upset. You know, you're in English right now, Mr. Brady. Why are you working on your math homework? Because I'm finished with my English assignment. And they would get upset. I don't know why, but it was always the teachers that didn't teach math that got up. It was like they targeted the math homework and the math teacher. But I won't mind if you use those days where we finish early to get ready for another class. All right. Any questions? Comments?
Can you print out those cities and
Yes.
stuff? Yes.
And if that's it, we'll close with a word of prayer. Any of y'all want to lead to that?
I will.
Go ahead.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, dear Lord, and we thank you for the opportunity to come and learn more about you, dear Lord. We pray for the rest of the day, dear Lord, that you just be with us and you just lead us and guide us in the right direction. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. That class went a lot better than yesterday.
Yeah. In the routine.
Oh, yeah.